Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for another virtual legal clinic, Know Your Rights, Public and Student Benefits. I'm Emily Alvarez, Say Yes Buffalo Legal Clinic Coordinator and Paralegal at the Volunteer Lawyers Project. Thank you to our partners, Say Yes Buffalo and Jelena Smallwood, Director of Parent and Family Engagement, for sponsoring today's presentation. Thank you as well to Nikki Parlato, Community School Navigator, for managing all of our tech for today. Before we get started, I wanted to remind all of our guests and participants that free legal advice is available through the Volunteer Lawyers Project. We can address any non-criminal legal issues such as family law, housing, divorce, unemployment, and other types of cases. Nikki, if you want to go to slide number 2. These are our hotline numbers that you can call if you have specific questions, like family law has their own hotline, housing has their own hotline. We'll show this flyer at the end of presentation as well, so you can have a chance to write down these phone numbers. I have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker, Ms. Diana Prosky. Diana Prosky is a staff attorney at Neighborhood Legal Services and has been working at NLS since 2008. She primarily handles public benefit matters, especially for those experiencing homelessness. Before joining NLS, Ms. Prosky spent 4 years handling workers' compensation cases. Ms. Prosky earned her bachelor's and master's in library and information science from Kent State University. She then attended the University at Buffalo Law School, graduating in 2003. Thank you so much, Diana, for today's presentation, and I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Just so that you are all aware, I am also a BPS parent. I have 2 children in the Buffalo Public Schools, who are still both at home. So what I'm going to do today is I came to talk to you guys about public benefits, particularly with an eye towards students who are about to be leaving high school and potentially going to college, so that you have an idea of what benefits might be available for the students while they're in school. So just to back up a little bit, in general, Neighborhood Legal Services handles public benefit matters, like the matters I'm going to talk about today. We also handle civil legal matters for people with low income in the areas of disability, housing, family, and public benefits. And we also have an on-staff group of health insurance navigators to help people get through the process of getting health insurance from the state. So what we do in relation to public benefit matters, is that we usually, once social services has taken a negative action, we will investigate and try to determine whether the action was lawful, and if not, what the client's rights are and what their options are. So we're going to go to the Knowing Your Rights Public Assistance Benefits slide, please. Okay, so I just wanted to go through this because every training I do for individuals who might be applicants or recipients of public assistance, I like to let you know what your rights are as an applicant or a recipient. So everyone has the right to apply and have their application processed. Even if social services is absolutely certain when they look right at you that you're not going to be eligible, if you want to apply, they have to accept your application, they have to process it, interview you, and make a written determination. Everyone has the right to ask for help getting documents or other verification to which they don't have access. Social services typically needs a lot of information before they can open a case. It's not an easy process, and it often involves the applicant or recipient having to produce copies of documents or sometimes even originals for the Department of Social Services. So if you can't get those documents, you can ask your worker to help you get them. Everyone has the right to a written decision on their application, regardless of which benefit they're applying for. The decision must include the reason for the denial and the regulation on which the decision is based. This is called a notice. Everyone has the right to review their file. You may not be entitled to free copies, but you have the right to see everything in your file. And if you want a copy of a particular document, social services can charge you for it, but they have to charge you a fair amount. Everyone has the right to request a conference and fair hearing if they disagree with the decision. At a hearing, everyone has the right to request and receive documents the agency will provide at the hearing. They also have the right to present their own testimony and evidence. And one thing that we do is represent people at fair hearings. Everyone has the right to reasonable accommodations in every step of the process, from filing the application to attending a fair hearing. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So the agency also has some rights. They have the right to interview you and to investigate whether you're eligible. The interview may be in person or over the phone. Since March, April of 2020, most interviews have been over the phone. They've really only been doing in-person interviews if it's either absolutely necessary or if the client specifically requests it for some reason. For example, if they need an interpreter and it's difficult to use the language line when both other parties are on the phone, so they may go in. The agency has the right to ask you to verify relevant facts, including as part of the fraud prevention program. So this may be verifying where you live, how much your rent expense is, who lives with you, anything that's relevant to your eligibility. And the agency has the right to time to process your case. The amount of time depends on the benefit. Okay, next slide, please. Some basic terms are helpful just as you navigate the process. An applicant is a person applying for a benefit. A recipient is a person whose application has been processed and approved. When we talk about temporary assistance, we're talking about the cash grant that traditionally was referred to as welfare to meet shelter, utility, and basic needs costs. An emergency is a need that must be met to ensure the person's health or safety, example, shelter, food, or heat during the winter. A reasonable accommodation is a change in the usual rules or procedures to ensure people with disabilities can access benefits and services, and that comes from the Americans with Disabilities Act. And a notice is written information about your case that must be provided whenever they make a decision on an application or about an existing case. It must provide specific information, and if it is about an existing benefit, it must be provided at least 10 days before the change is made. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm just going to talk briefly about emergency assistance benefits. Emergencies are immediate needs, which is sort of a higher level of emergency, if the person or family's health or safety would be at risk unless the need is met that day. In the case of an immediate need, the Department of Social Services has to interview the person and they have to give them a written decision the same day they apply. So this would be, for example, shelter. If you have nowhere to stay tonight, that is an immediate need because you do not have shelter and your health and safety is going to be dependent on having shelter. Other emergency benefits include shelter, rent arrears, utility assistance, which is actually a separate program from HEAP, security to obtain new housing, moving assistance, storage fees, repair, replacement, or the purchase of appliances, depending on the situation, furniture to establish new housing. There may be replacement of clothing after a natural disaster or a fire. Each benefit has different rules and regulations. So when you are applying for emergency assistance, whether you're eligible, it's really going to depend on what you're applying for. Students may be eligible for emergency benefits. Students who do not live with their parents and are financially independent can apply for emergency, well, anyone can apply for emergency assistance benefits. But students who are independent from their parents may also be eligible for emergency assistance benefits if, for example, their gas is going to be shut off. And then I do want to make a quick note about HEAP at this point. HEAP, for those of you who aren't aware, has been extended until the end of August of 2021, which is fantastic. They also have added a third emergency HEAP benefit. So if you're still struggling to keep your utilities on, if you're getting a shutoff notice, even though there's a moratorium, you still want to go ahead and apply for HEAP and or emergency HEAP to try to keep getting those benefits so that the bill can be paid. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the benefit most people think of as welfare is the ongoing temporary assistance or cash grant program. It's a monthly grant provided to individuals or households to pay for basic costs, rent, utilities, and then everything else, which is referred to as your basic needs. All applicants who are under 60 must participate in an employability assessment. And there are basically 3 outcomes to this employability assessment. You may be unable to work because of a medical or psychiatric condition, so you have a disability. You're unable to work because of a substance abuse disorder, in which case you would be required to attend substance abuse treatment programs, or you're capable of working. And then you will be required to participate in both job search and work activities and training activities. and a combination of those. This is the reason traditionally between 1994-ish and 2014, students usually couldn't get benefits. There was no prohibition against getting benefits for college students and community college students, but most students couldn't manage both the work activity requirements, which are essentially full-time, and school. The other reason many students couldn't get public assistance is because there was no guarantee of daycare or assistance program for daycare while you were going to school. It wasn't an accepted activity to get daycare. So if you were a parenting person who wanted to go to school, you couldn't get daycare while you were going to school. So what happened is a lot of people just couldn't go to school. I did see some cases where people were able to manage it, but it was usually because they had some kind of access to free daycare. They had family and friends who were willing to watch the kids while they were in class. So all of that changed, which is fantastic. Could I go to the next slide, please? So as I said, as of 2014, full-time college or community college students can use school toward their employment program hours. So this change allowed students to fulfill the obligation to participate in work activities while attending school. It also meant that parenting students could get daycare because school is considered a work activity, so they could get daycare for their children while they're at school. All they have to do is explain the program to the employment counselor at the Department of Social Services and ask that school be used as their work activity and made a part of their employment plan. If it's approved, then the work hours, and in some cases homework hours, they have some formulas where they figure out how to calculate that, count toward the obligated work activity. So you can go to school while you're getting public assistance and not have to worry about those work activities because you're already fulfilling that responsibility. If a student asks a temporary assistance employment counselor to make school their work activity and part of their employment plan, if the worker refuses, the student has a right to request a hearing and go in front of a judge and make social services explain why they're not eligible for the program. Okay, next slide. So in general, once a case opens, regardless of whether you're a student or participating in a substance abuse program or unable to work because of a disability, the grants are divided into 3 parts. So there is what's referred to as the shelter allowance. That's your rent, utilities. You get a gas allowance essentially, or a heating allowance if you pay your own heating bills, and basic needs, which is pretty much everything else. Recipients can get benefits even if they don't have a rent expense. You also can get benefits if you don't have a permanent address. That's important to note because we do see students who unfortunately experience homelessness, but you don't need a permanent address, and you can have mail sent to a friend, a relative, a case manager, wherever you can get it, a PO box, if you don't have a residential address. Work activities and substance abuse treatment must be complied with, or a sanction may be imposed. So for example, if you stop going to class and the school reports to the Department of Social Services that you're no longer attending classes and don't really seem to be engaged in school, then you might still face an employment sanction. If you are a student who was referred to the substance abuse treatment program and you stop going to treatment, you may be sanctioned. So that is an important thing to keep in mind. You will also be required to recertify periodically. Usually it's about every 6 months, and you must attend those appointments. I put in here the mail is often an issue. Many of our clients move around a lot. So if you have trouble, or they live in rooming houses, or other places where maybe they don't have their own locked mailbox. So if you are having trouble with your mail, I recommend that you contact social services and let them know, preferably in writing, as soon as possible, and give them an alternative address where they can also send notices to make sure that you're getting the notices. Next slide, please. So to give you an example of how much you get when you receive public assistance, it is not very much. The legislature sets these amounts for the state. And so for each household size, depending, as you can see at the top, there's an allowance if you have children in your household, and then there's a different allowance if you don't have children in your household. So if you are a single person without any children, your basic needs is $183. Your shelter allowance, which is what the department expects you to pay for rent, is $169. And your monthly gas allowance is $54. These are not realistic. They haven't been changed in many years. But it's also better than not having any income. And if you have, for example, a rent subsidy, it definitely makes a difference. If you don't have a permanent address, if you don't have a rent expense, so say you're living with your parents, you could get a basic needs allowance of just $183. So you can have that part of it without having the other parts of the grant. Next slide, please. All right, so temporary assistance also has to look at your other income in the household. And this is whose income counts depends on their situation. So the fact that your household has income does not necessarily mean you're going to be ineligible for temporary assistance. But different types of income are budgeted differently. So it's honestly going to be different for each situation. So earned income, so income from work. If you have a family with a child in it, that family is going to first get a disregard of $90 of their earned income and then get an additional 50-some% disregarded. I don't remember the exact percentage for this year, but it changes each year and it's always around half. So they ignore half of your income if you have children in your household and you're working and you're getting temporary assistance. Without children, you only get the $90 disregard. Student earned income is generally going to be exempt with some minor exceptions. But for the most part, if you have a student between 18 and 21 who's working on the temporary assistance case, their income may very well be disregarded. So you want to pay attention to that. And definitely if they're in high school. Social Security, it depends on the type of income. So SSI is exempt. They remove both the recipient and the income from your household. So if I'm a household of 5 and I have SSI and the rest of my family has public assistance, then I'm going to be a public assistance household of 4 because they're going to ignore both my needs and my income as an SSI recipient. Other types of Social Security income will count dollar for dollar usually. So SSD, survivor's benefits, Social Security retirement benefits are going to count against your grant. Child support, if you have a child support collection order, then you would have to assign your right to child support to the Department of Social Services. But they are going to let you keep the first $200 of up to the first $200 of current support. So that also will not count against your grant, which is really helpful because it basically gives the custodial parent up to $200 of child support in addition to the existing public assistance grant without changing the grant. And then the department would keep the rest. Unemployment benefits used to be fairly simple. They counted against the grant. Now parts of them are exempt, but it depends on which benefit and when you get it. So right now, most people are receiving what you would call a base rate. So that's their typical unemployment amount that they would get from the state. They are also getting additional pandemic benefits from the federal government that run through the state. So, and the $600 payments that went through April 2020 through the end of July 2020 counted. They counted against public assistance and they counted against SNAP. So a lot of people lost their benefits during that period. The $300 payments that started in August or September and are still continuing are exempt. So social services will only consider the base rate against your public assistance grant. The other $300 a week, if you're getting the pandemic federal benefit, will not count. So it's a little bit confusing. So we have had cases where we've gone through and we've checked, and our county, Erie County, does appear to be doing a really good job with this, but things slip through the cracks. So it's a good idea to just check and make sure that they're only counting your base rate. And then student loans, scholarships, and grants are disregarded as income. They're completely ignored. So if it's a benefit that is meant, for your educational purposes, it should be exempt. It should not be counted as income or a resource for public assistance purposes. and that actually applies to SNAP as well. Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide. Thank you. So there's also a thing called household composition. It's really just who lives with you. But where the student lives and whether they are over or under 21 will impact the benefits. That's because in the state of New York, parents are financially responsible for their children until they're 21, not when they get out of high school. So families who are currently receiving public assistance, if you have a child who is about to graduate and is going to start college in the fall, now when they get out of high school, they're going to be required to comply with work activities. So that's when you're going to say, okay, we want work activity to be college. That's really important because that's how you're going to keep them on the public assistance case. Otherwise, you're either going to have them enroll in the work activity, or you're going to have to remove them from your case and they won't get benefits. Independent students with a rent expense will be entitled to a full grant. Independent students without a rent expense, so maybe they're just staying with a relative while they go to school, but they're not paying rent, they would be entitled to a basic needs grant. One thing to keep in mind, when you have a student who's under 21, or any child under 21, if they leave your home and open a separate cash assistance case, the County Department of Social Services can come after you for child support because you're financially responsible up to 21. But if you're already on public assistance and you can just keep them on your case by having their work activity be college, you should be all set. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so that's cash assistance. Now we're going to talk about SNAP, which is a whole separate program because the SNAP rules are federal. So SNAP used to be known as food stamps, and its benefits provided to low-income households, specifically to purchase food. The budgeting methodology for SNAP is different than it is for cash assistance. It's primarily based on rent and utility costs versus income. So if you have somebody who has a low rent cost or no rent cost, and whose utilities are included in rent, or they don't have utilities at all, utility expenses at all, they're usually going to get a much lower amount of SNAP than a household with rent and separate utilities. Applications, actually for temporary assistance as well, can be submitted at mybenefits.my.gov. It's a pretty, as far as I can tell, most people do quite well with the process. You can also use it to upload your documents. If, for example, you need to submit any documents to the Department of Social Services rather than having to mail them, fax them, or actually take them down. Expedited SNAP is available if your household has $100 or less in liquid resources and less than $150 in monthly income, or if your monthly income and available resources are less than your shelter and utility costs. And that will also apply if you are an eligible student. Next slide, please. So typically full-time students have not been considered eligible for SNAP benefits unless they fit into one of a handful of exceptions. So this actually prevented a lot of students for many years from getting SNAP benefits. The most common exceptions are students who work 20 hours per week while they're in school, students who receive federal work study and participate in federal work study as part of their financial aid, and students who are caring for a child under 6. That also can include single parents who are caring for a child under 12. However, full-time students who receive temporary assistance are going to be eligible for SNAP through their temporary assistance case. So if your college student has their temporary assistance case, they're going to automatically get SNAP as part of that case. They'll be considered an eligible student. If you are an ineligible student, or if the Social Services Department determines that you're an ineligible student and you disagree, you also have the right to challenge this. So you can say, no, I am an eligible student. Next slide, please. Okay, so they have made a lot of changes to SNAP during COVID. Some of them are related to COVID. I think some of them maybe were already in the works, but it has made it so much easier for students to get and maintain SNAP benefits. So one of the changes to the student eligibility rules, one is something called the CTE program. It's called Career and Technical Education. So if you are a college student or a community college student who is enrolled in a qualifying CTE program, you are eligible for SNAP benefits. And the way you find out if it's a qualifying program is actually by asking your school. The Department of Social Services doesn't make that decision, the school does. And schools should be setting up programs to make sure that students in eligible programs are aware that they might be eligible for the benefit and have some assistance in order to get them. They have also allowed students who are getting unemployment benefits to get food stamps. That's really important because so many students work part-time jobs in service industries and lost their jobs during the pandemic. If you have a $0 family contribution when you submit your FAFSA, that is now makes you an eligible student. Or if you are in a career in tech, I'm sorry, I already said that. Or if you are in a SNAP employment and training program or attending an educational opportunity center as established by the state of New York. So these are all, they seem like sort of small, independent, unrelated things, but it's really important to help make sure that we're allowing students to access these benefits and that people understand that as a student, you may very well be eligible to either remain on your parents' SNAP case or to have your own SNAP case if you've left your parents' household. Because we know that there is a lot of food insecurity among college students and community college students. So it's helpful to know that. I will also say that some schools have programs set up for the work activity and through public assistance. So I know ECC has it all set up and they will tell students who are either applying for or receiving cash assistance, hey, you know, we have the program set up, you know, let's do it this way so that school counts as your work activity. So if you have a student entering college or community college, you might want to have them ask the school what services are available to help them get or keep their benefits. For student income with SNAP, grants, scholarships, and loans that are meant for educational purposes, so pretty much your traditional financial aid, including your student loans, are excluded as income. If you have SNAP and your student is not eligible, their income won't be counted against your budget. So if I'm a parent and my child is going to college and they don't fit into any of the exceptions, so they're no longer eligible for food stamps, they're going to remove them from my case, but their income also won't count. So that helps prevent the financial damage to the rest of the household by causing a reduction in food stamps. And if you are helping your adult student who receives benefits, you want it financially. I mean, you want to make sure that you're not giving them the money directly. The best thing to do is just pay bills for them directly to the vendor. So pay their cable bill, pay their cell phone bill, pay their internet bill, you can pay their rent, but pay it directly to the person owed. Don't give the money to the student because then it will be considered a gift that will count against their benefits and they will just end up not having enough SNAP or assistance. And then pandemic EBT. I know this program isn't specifically about students in school, but I wanted to just give an update because New York's plan for pandemic EBT was recently approved. For people who don't know, pandemic EBT is a benefit that is for students who were eligible, who were receiving free school meals, but didn't because they weren't in school because of the pandemic. So we saw this start last spring. They initially provide benefits through the SNAP and Medicaid programs. So if you already have a SNAP or Medicaid case, you will probably see your pandemic EBT for fall 2020 and spring 2021 a lot sooner. They also increased the amount, so it's $6.82 per day for each day the child was remote. So you could sort of estimate that if your child is remote for the entire school year and is attending virtually and was receiving free school meals, then that's around $1,300 per student per household. And then it would be reduced from there based on the number of days the child actually attended school. So as I said, if you don't already get SNAP or Medicaid, it will probably be longer before you see the benefits. If you didn't keep the card that they sent last fall or last summer, you can request a new one from the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, and I put the website up there. They update it regularly, so if you want to keep checking back to see what's going on, you can. And that is all I have. I don't know if there are questions or. other concerns? But definitely, if you have a student and you're not sure they're eligible, or if your local Department of Social Services says they're not, you can give us a call and we can look into it and find out.
Thank you so much, Diana, for today's presentation. That was incredible. So much information. I appreciate the recent updates. I know that just happened this week, so that was very
Mhm.
timely for today's presentation. Nikki, if you can go to slide number 3, where it has Neighborhood Legal Services phone number.
So fast.
Slide 3.
Yeah. And then just so everybody knows, we do have offices in Batavia and in Niagara Falls if you happen to live in those areas and want assistance from our office. And the rules apply statewide. They're not specific to Erie County.
Yes, so if you have any questions related to public benefits and students, the information presented today, you can definitely give Neighborhood Legal Services a call on their phone number 716-847-0650. And then if you want to show the hotline flyer really quick, these are the hotline numbers for the Volunteer Lawyers Project. Again, if you have any non-criminal legal questions or concerns that you have, for example, family law, housing, unemployment, divorce, you can give our office a call, or any other cases, our office number 716-847-0662. Thank you so much again, Diana, and Say Yes Buffalo. I hope everyone has a good day.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.